Analysis. The precipice. Dawn of the doomsday scenario in the Middle East. Introduction. The echo of annihilation. The world is holding its breath, watching the Middle East. But we are mistaken. We are no longer watching a conflict. We are witnessing the opening chapters of an indictment against humanity itself, a script for annihilation in which the old rules have been incinerated in the fireballs of ballistic missiles and preemptive airstrikes. The data you have provided is not a news report. It is a meticulous logbook of the world's final steps before it plunges into a total war from which there may be no survivors to tell the tale. The confrontation between Iran and Israel, with the direct kinetic involvement of the United States, has obliterated every red line ever drawn. This is no longer a shadow war fought through proxies like Hezbollah or Hamas. This is a direct face-to-face duel between titans, a dance of destruction performed with the most sophisticated killing technologies ever conceived. The buffer zones are gone. The era of strategic ambiguity is over. Now, only the naked, brutal truth remains. An open, unforgiving, and exponentially escalating war that is hurtling towards the nuclear threshold. Forget the feeble calls for diplomacy. Set aside the pathetically optimistic tweets. The reality on the ground tells a different story, a story soaked in dread and terror. Part 1. The technological nightmare, when weapons dictate politics. Let us begin by dissecting the very nature of the military engagement. Iran's Operation True Promise was not a mere retaliatory act. It was a horrifying declaration of technological capability. The use of 40 ballistic missiles, particularly the new generation K-bars, demonstrates that Iran is not only willing but terrifyingly confident in its ability to penetrate Israel's supposedly inviolable defenses. Let's dissect the monster named K-bars. A 1,500 kilometers range, a speed of Mach 12, 14,700 kilometers per h, a maneuverable re-entry vehicle, MAV, and a circular error probable, CEP, of just 50 meters. This is not a missile, it is a hypersonic scalpel capable of moving at the speed of a meteor. It was designed not just to strike, but to overwhelm and paralyze any defensive system. When Iran claims to have hit the Bankan airport, a biological research center, and command and control hubs, the message is chillingly clear. Your shield is an illusion. We can touch you anywhere, anytime. This is the first shocking realization. The balance of power, long predicated on defensive technology, has collapsed. For decades, Israel has lived under the protective umbrella of its Iron Dome, David's Sling, and Arrow systems. Iran has now demonstrated that with sufficient quantity and quality of missiles, that umbrella can be shredded. This forces Israel into a strategically intolerable position. It can no longer rely on passive defense. The only option left is preemptive attack, a doctrine already seared into its national security psyche, and they acted accordingly. Israel's Operation Roaring Lion is even more terrifying. The activation of sleeper cells to launch UAVs from inside Iranian territory is a devastating blow to Iran's national pride and internal security. It reveals the terrifying depth of Mossad's intelligence penetration, but that was merely the overture. The coordinated U.S.-Israeli attack on 3 critical nuclear facilities, Fordow, Natanz, and Isfahan, is an act that could ignite World War III. Consider the sheer audacity and recklessness of this move. American B-2 stealth bombers dropping GBU-57 MOP bunker buster bombs on Fordow, a facility built deep inside a mountain specifically to withstand such an attack. This was not a warning shot, it was an attempt at surgical eradication, a move to rip out Iran's nuclear program by its roots with absolute force. The launch of 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles from submarines at Isfahan and Natanz only confirms the staggering scale of this operation. The direct participation of the United States, however it is framed, fundamentally changes the game. This is no longer just Israel's war, it is America's war. This elevates Iran from a regional adversary to a nation in a state of direct conflict with the world's sole superpower, and this explains Israel's claim to have destroyed half of Iran's estimated 2,500 surface-to-surface missiles. This is a war of annihilation, designed to strip Iran of its capacity to retaliate. What is the bewildering consequence here? Both sides have proven they can land devastating blows deep within each other's territory. Iran can overwhelm Israel's defenses, while Israel and the US can strike Iran's most hardened and secret sites. The gray zone has vanished. Now every attack is an existential threat, forcing the other side into an even greater escalation. We are in an uncontrollable feedback loop of violence. Part 2. The Nuclear Nightmare. Pandora's box is ajar. If the conventional war is terrifying, the nuclear dimension of this conflict is the script for Armageddon. The attacks on Isfahan, Natanz, and Fordow were not just military actions, they were a dance on the lip of a nuclear volcano. The IAEA confirms Isfahan hosts a uranium enrichment plant. 2 of the 4 buildings destroyed there were reportedly critical for nuclear weapons development. This was not a warning. This was a brutal surgery to excise Iran's nuclear tumor. Israel's stated objective to destroy Iran's nuclear capabilities is an irreversible declaration of total war aims. But this is where the true horror begins. What happens if one of these attacks is miscalculated? What if a stray bomb breaches the containment vessel of the Bushehr nuclear power plant? Experts warn of a catastrophe that would dwarf Chernobyl. Bushehr is located on the coast. A major meltdown or breach would not only release a deadly radioactive plume into the atmosphere, but it would permanently poison the Persian Gulf. Imagine this scenario in detail. The entire water supply for the Gulf states, the UAE, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, and parts of Saudi Arabia, which survive on seawater desalination, would become radioactive. Tens of millions would be left without clean drinking water. Their economies, built on sand and oil, would collapse in days. The global fishing industry would be contaminated. Ocean currents would carry the radioactive poison across the globe. This is not a regional disaster. This is a planetary-level extinction event. And here is the point of outrage. The leaders in Washington and Tel Aviv, in their quest to prevent a potential future nuclear threat, are recklessly risking a real present-day nuclear disaster. President Trump's statement, hoping the strikes would bring Tehran back to the negotiating table, is either breathtakingly naive or a cynical, transparent lie. You do not bomb a nation into submission and then expect it to negotiate in good faith. Iran's reaction only deepens the sense of bewilderment. President Pezeshkian states a readiness to discuss but would not agree to reduce nuclear activities to zero. From a sovereign standpoint, this is a rational position. In the current context, it is a death sentence. For Israel, anything other than zero is an existential threat. These two positions cannot be reconciled. They can only be settled by force. Russia's involvement, offering to mediate while demanding safety for its personnel at Bushehr, only adds another layer of gasoline to the fire. It transforms a regional conflict into a stage for a global nuclear power standoff. Now, every move by Israel or the US must account for Moscow's reaction. The doomsday clock is not just ticking, it is screaming. Part 3. The cancer's spread. No one is a bystander. One of the most dangerous illusions in any conflict is the belief that it can be contained. This war has shattered that illusion with brutal finality. The declaration by Yemen's Houthi forces to enter the war alongside Tehran is a catastrophic development. The Houthis are not just a militia, they are the de facto rulers of a nation occupying one of the most strategic locations on Earth, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, a choke point for global trade. Their warning to US and Israeli ships is not an idle threat. They have already proven their ability to strike maritime traffic in the Red Sea. Now the war is not just in the skies over Iran and Israel. It has spread to one of the planet's most vital commercial arteries. Shipping costs will skyrocket, global supply chains will snap, and inflation will explode worldwide. The life of an ordinary citizen in Europe or Asia now hangs on a missile fired from a desert in Yemen. Israel's strategy of targeting and neutralizing senior commanders of the Quds Force, including the head of IRGC intelligence, is a high-risk decapitation tactic. The Quds Force is the brain and heart of Iran's proxy network. Eliminating its experienced leaders may cause temporary disruption, but it also creates a power vacuum to be filled by even more radical, more unpredictable, and more vengeful actors. Instead of extinguishing the fire, Israel may have thrown an accelerant on it. Meanwhile, the U.S. withdrawal of diplomatic personnel from Iraq is a symbol of complete and utter collapse. Iraq, the nation America spent trillions of dollars and thousands of lives to rebuild, is now too dangerous for American diplomats. This is a bitter admission of defeat. It shows that American influence in the region is evaporating, and the vacuum is being filled by pro-Iranian armed groups. Iraq, instead of being a bulwark against Iran, is becoming a launching pad for it. The verdict for Iraq has been written. It will be the bloody battleground for the US-Iran confrontation. Part 4. The War in the Mind, the Death of Truth. Perhaps the most insidious war is not being fought on the battlefield, but on the screens of our phones and computers. The information war in this conflict has reached an unprecedented level of sophistication and toxicity. The report that Iran has exploited private surveillance cameras in Israel for real-time intelligence is a privacy and security nightmare. It dissolves the line between civilian and military. Every security camera, every smart device can become the eyes of the enemy. This injects paranoia and fear into every home. Conversely, the Iranian government's move to restrict internet access and block popular apps like WhatsApp and Instagram is an act of holding its own citizens hostage. In a war, information is life. Blocking these apps not only severs communication, but also denies citizens basic safety tools like Google Maps to find escape routes. This is the act of a panicked regime willing to sacrifice its own people to control the narrative. The emergence of Elon Musk and Starlink is not a solution, but another destabilizing factor. A single tech billionaire now wields the power of a nation-state to decide who gets to access the global commons of information. This sets a dangerous precedent where private corporations can intervene in international conflicts at will, further eroding national sovereignty. And most terrifying of all is the rampant spread of misinformation and fake news. AI-generated images, out-of-context videos, a digital fog of war has descended upon everyone. No one can trust what they see. Truth has become a relative concept. In such an environment, how can there be peace? How can there be trust? When you cannot distinguish a real attack from a fake one, every action is interpreted in the worst possible light. Controlling the narrative has become as important as victory on the battlefield, and in this war, all sides are losing. Part 5. The Silent Scream, the Human Toll. Amidst the geopolitical calculus and displays of high-tech weaponry, there is a truth being brutally and conveniently forgotten: the human cost. The Gaza Strip remains in a humanitarian crisis that words cannot describe. The figure of 55,637 fatalities is not a statistic. It is 55,637 worlds extinguished, 55,637 families shattered. Aid workers are collapsing from lack of food. Hospitals have ceased to function. This is a man-made hell on earth, and the most outrageous part is that it is being overshadowed by the more dramatic confrontation between Iran and Israel. The suffering of the Palestinians is becoming a footnote in a grander story, an acceptable sacrifice on the chessboard of great powers. The protests across Europe reveal a profound schism between the people and their governments. While tens of thousands march to demand a ceasefire, their leaders are busy activating war contingency plans and calculating the profits from arms sales. The public's rage is real, but it is impotent against the war machine that has already been set in motion. Even the protests in Tehran and Baghdad paint a disturbing picture. Crowds chanting "No to Israel, no to America," waving Hezbollah flags show how deeply hatred has been ingrained in the consciousness of large segments of the population. They are not just supporting their governments, they are being mobilized for a holy war. The atmosphere is poisoned with ultranationalism and religious hatred, the perfect fuel for a war that could last for decades. And finally, the diplomatic efforts are a farcical theater. The call from 9 EU countries to end trade with Israeli settlements while bombs are falling on Iran is like trying to extinguish a forest fire with a water pistol. It demonstrates Europe's impotence and irrelevance on the world stage. At the UN Security Council, ambassadors merely repeat hardened rhetoric, asserting their right to self-defense while their world burns around them. Conclusion: no way back. We are no longer standing at a crossroads where one path leads to peace and the other to war. We passed that junction long ago. We are now on a one-way road plunging into an abyss. This confrontation has passed the point of no return. Militarily, both sides have deployed their most strategic weapons against each other's most sensitive targets. The red lines have been erased. Nuclearly, the strikes on nuclear facilities have set a terrifying precedent. Iran now has a more compelling reason than ever to pursue a nuclear weapon as the ultimate deterrent, while Israel will never accept that outcome. This is an equation with no peaceful solution. Regionally, the war has metastasized, drawing in new actors and turning neighboring countries into battlefields. The fire in the Middle East now threatens to ignite a global conflagration. Informationally, truth is dead. In a world of fake news and paranoia, every attempt at de-escalation will be met with suspicion and sabotage. We are witnessing the birth of a new world order, one defined not by treaties and diplomacy, but by the range of missiles and the yield of bombs. The greatest fear is not that a total war might happen, but that it has already begun, and we, in our distraction and impotence, are merely watching it unfold. The question is no longer how do we prevent the war, but rather who will be left to clean up the ashes. And that is a question to which none of us should want to know the answer.